Hello, we have Kevin Elsey here with us today because Vince is away. Kevin, thank you for joining us. I think some of you already know Kevin Elsey. He's started at the starting point as an intern. He is now an LPC. The majority of the work that he has, professional work he has done, has been in the hospice field, providing spiritual support and bereavement follow-up. Today, he is spending more and more time at the starting point, and he does counseling with both individuals and couples. Kevin, did I leave anything out?
No, thanks for having me.
Okay. So, Kevin, we got you here today to talk to us about bouncing back, the power of resilience. Why don't we start with a definition and you can jump right in?
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. I obviously have big shoes to fill. I don't intend to fill them. Vince does his thing. I just am glad he let me fill in for this evening. So in talking about bouncing back and the power of resilience, I wanted to just give you a little definition, and it's this: emotional resilience is the ability to adapt to stressful situations and cope with life's ups and downs. Resilience doesn't eliminate stress and it doesn't erase life's difficulties, but resilience does allow us to tackle or accept our problems, live through adversity, and move on with our lives. So that's kind of a fancy way of saying bouncing back. And how do we do that? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
Um, so after 2 years of testing our resilience, being locked down, quarantined, masked, and everything else, um, is our resilience worn out or tired or underdeveloped? Do we have any left, Kevin? I guess is what I'm
Yeah, right.
asking.
So great question, because Loretta, one of the things that I hope you all will take away from this is that this whole COVID experience has been an ideal lab to develop resilience, except for those who are introverted and really found no quibble with having to be quarantining or living and interacting without social engagement. But for those of us who are oriented toward being around people, oriented toward um, doing things in a group setting, COVID really has tested people's resilience. So for some people, their resilience has grown. Others have kind of gotten into a place where they're just stuck in a cycle based on COVID. And they're really wondering, well, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Where am I going to be stuck at again? So their resilience really hasn't expanded at all. And hopefully tonight, we'll be able to talk about not just what COVID does, but what other traumatic events, whether it's the loss of a spouse, a breakup, whether you have issues with a family member, a child, something has happened at work that has really tested your patience. There are so many things in life. Just take a look at how much road rage has increased in recent months, or at least the publicity around it. So I really want you to know that we're in an ideal time. If you want to develop your resilience, if you are feeling like I need to learn how to develop that more, it's an ideal time to begin that process.
And Kevin, one of the things that you talked about earlier today was the visual about palm trees and what that represents to give us sort of the visual definition because it felt
Yeah.
good. It was more positive.
So here's what I find very helpful in understanding resilience. Those of you who have been to Florida know palm trees, but you also know that hurricanes come through. and the palm trees bend to the point that they appear that they're going to snap and break off. But after the storm has passed, within a few days, maybe a week, the palm tree is back to its full splendor again. It bent, but it didn't break. And the thing that I want to make sure you guys understand around resilience is it presupposes that there's been something that's happened to us out of the ordinary. Resilience doesn't just happen without the pressure of some life event that bends us to the point that we feel like we're going to break. Now, granted, there are some extreme circumstances where people do break, and I'm not making light of those, but I think that those things are the exception, not the rule. So if I can help all of us understand that we've got great opportunities to learn how to bend but not break, we will have had a good time tonight.
So Kevin, talk to us about what are the pillars of resistance?
Um,
I'm sorry. Is it resistance or resilience?
no, it's resilience. I was a typo on my part. Yeah. So resilience has one of the things that Loretta and I just stumbled upon. That's the ability to make a mistake and not let it be the end of the world. I made a typo. Many times when we are finding ourselves being less than resilient, any little error we make becomes magnified. And rather than being resilient and being able to move past it, we get stuck in it. If you've ever had to deal with feelings of perfectionism or not being good enough, you'll know how difficult that can be. So I'll give you a little example. I growing up, it was challenging to feel like if I made a mistake, it would be okay. It seemed in my household, making mistakes was always catastrophic. And so I went to the far end of the extreme. I became very perfectionistic. Everything I did had to be done perfectly. Writing a paper was so cumbersome because if I made a mistake, rather than crossing it out and going back, I just started all over again. So as I developed resilience, it meant being able to sit with the mistake, being able to see a glaring mistake on paper and not freak out about it. And once I became a little more resilient in that area, it helped me to grow in others. But Loretta asked about what these 5 pillars are. So let me share them with you real quick. The first pillar is the pillar of self-awareness. Often we can't capture the thoughts that we're having when we get stuck in a cycle that keeps repeating. All we know is that we're stuck in it. And we haven't figured out how to be resilient and get out of it. Well, I encourage people to be aware of what your body is saying. Sometimes people get stomach aches, others get back aches, sometimes people get shoulder aches, headaches. That's the body's way of informing you when you are kind of at a stress point. And if we don't pay attention to that, the thoughts that we're having about ourselves will kind of submerge. They'll go down into our subconscious, but they're constantly playing. So when we become self-aware, we let our body teach us what we need to know about what we're thinking. So become self-aware. The second thing is to be mindful. When you're developing resilience, be mindful of how you typically handle stressful situations. To be mindful means simply that. It means just be aware of it, be mindful of it, but don't look to change it. Many times we are quick to want to change ourselves without really just sitting with what's going on and observing ourselves. The third thing is take care of ourselves, self-care. We become less able to bounce back when we're not taking care of ourselves. And many of us are subject to take care of everybody and everything except for ourselves. And in doing that, you know the airplane motto, right? When you get onto an airplane, what do they tell you? In case of an emergency, put your mask on first before you help someone else with theirs. That's what self-care is. If you're going to be resilient and bounce back from things, you got to take care of yourself before we try to fix and help everybody else. Have positive relationships. Find people who are positive. Now, I'm not talking about happy-go-lucky, but I am talking about people who you know that despite the challenges of their life, they've learned how to remain positive. They've learned how to keep moving in a positive fashion. And then the fifth pillar is have purpose. So that when you have purpose for your life, you don't waste these stressful moments. They don't become moments that stress you out, but they have no redemptive value. So be purposeful in what you're trying to accomplish in being resilient. It may simply mean you're going to conquer this one thing that you've not been real resilient around. When I'm with my family and the kids have plucked my last nerve, rather than just retreating and running somewhere else, I'm going to stay there for 5 more minutes. That's going to be my purpose, is to learn how to gradually increase my ability to be resilient. So those are the 5 pillars. We'll, I'm sure, talk about them a little later, but at least you have them in front of you.
Kevin, I just want to ask you something about positive relationships. Make sure you're surrounded by positive relationships. Sometimes we wake up and we didn't realize that some of our family members are not the most positive people in the world. Um, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we can't kick them out of the house. So how do we do that?
So all of us have what I call an Uncle Jake in our family. And Uncle Jake is the one who can always find something that's not good in everything that is pretty much good. And you're right, Loretta, you can't just cut them off, but you can set up boundaries around yourself. I'm going to hang out with Uncle Jake for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to have somebody text me or call me so that I can gracefully get away from Uncle Jake. If I'm at a family gathering, especially when you're in the middle, you know, Christmas, the holidays, they can really test our resilience, especially if you've been through a loss. It's those holidays that really bring back to us the memory of what our loss may have been. So if you're around people who are constantly reminding you of where you missed it or what you did wrong or what didn't go right, I would encourage you to limit your exposure to those people. Consciously do it with a smile on your face. Find a way to be polite, but yet say, you know, I've got to do something else now. And people will respect that, I hope.
That's really great advice, Kevin. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
So we were going to let you talk through and take your time with it. How 10 ways to build your resilience.
Okay, so everybody, I think that there are a number of things that we can do. But let me share this with you about resilience, because there's often the question of whether it's nature, that people by nature are resilient. Some people just seem to be able to bounce back. Or is it nurture? Is it how we were raised? Evidence shows that many people who are resilient in their childhood experiences have learned how to be resilient. They've learned how to work through problems and work through situations because they weren't rescued from them. Some people, however, by nature, are not quite as resilient. But the good news is research shows us that all of us can develop our capacity for resilience. And here's what I think is important to know. Resilience really is about how you think about yourself in those times when life really seems to be against you. Is your internal thought, it's always my fault, there's something wrong with me, I just attract these problems, the universe is out to get me? If those are the thoughts that you're having, you're really counteracting your ability to be resilient. And before I give you these 10 ways of building resilience, let me also say to you, building resilience takes time. We're having a very condensed opportunity to talk tonight, but resilience is built day by day. Whatever you do in building your resilience, know that at best, if you practice resilience for 15 minutes a day, you're going to make much better progress than if you wait for a major problem and then say, well, I'm going to devote 2 hours to dealing with resilience. Your brain really shuts off after about 15 minutes. I tell the story, and I told this story a little earlier, about years ago learning how to play ping pong. And I was at a work site and they had a ping pong table. And at break, I would get on the table and there was a guy there who would beat me religiously at ping pong. He would just wear me out. I mean, just beat me and laugh at me. But every day I went back and played another game with him. Played, get beat, played, get beat, played, get beat. Until one day it happened that the tide turned and I beat him. I literally wiped him off the table. He was shocked, I was shocked, but resilience had paid off. Why? Because I kept at it. And so resilience means that we have to know that we got to keep at it. In a microwave society, a microwave world, resilience isn't built in a microwave moment. It happens on a daily basis, changing how we see life. So let me talk to you about these building blocks for resilience. Number one, make connections with other people. I'm sure you know somebody in your sphere who is resilient. And that can be intimidating because if you're shy or you're embarrassed or you feel shame because you're not quite that resilient, you'll tend to shy away from someone who is resilient. I would encourage you to just maybe follow them from a distance, but begin to develop, don't stalk. I'm not saying stalk them, don't stalk them, but just develop the ability to just be around someone who you know is resilient. Don't let it be a mirror of your lack of resilience. Let it be an opportunity for you to learn how to be more resilient. Find people who know more than you know. I told the group earlier, most of us, we go to dinner and you get one fork, one knife, one spoon. But then there are times you go to a fancy restaurant, they got 6 spoons, 5 forks, and 3 knives. And you're like, what do I do with all this stuff? Well, that's what resilience is like. It causes us to expand, to grow. So make connections with people in your life who you know are already operating in resilience. Second thing, avoid seeing crises as insurmountable problems. Sometimes people have a crisis and they think, oh my God, this is it. I'll never get through it. But what I found is most people do get through. Some of us get through limping, others get through shaking in our boots, but we find a way to get through it. So when you can begin to say to yourself, this too shall pass. I've conquered one thing, I can conquer this. You begin to cause your mind to think about solutions rather than thinking about how you will be stuck in a situation. Third thing is accept that change is a part of life. Change is a part of life. People have been talking about in this post-COVID time, I'll be so glad when things get back to normal. Honestly, there is no going back to normal. We're creating a new normal. Life will never be as it was. Some of us have lost friends and family who were dear. We will never have life like it was, but you can create a life that is still full, a life that shows that you were able to bounce back. So accept that change is a part of living. Number 4, set a goal and begin to move toward it. Whether it's a step at a time or a half a step, set yourself a realistic goal. Sometimes we set goals and they are just unattainable. And then we are frustrated because the goal was not achieved. I encourage you to set a realistic goal for yourself and then break it down in the small components. So how is an elephant eaten? One bite at a time. There may be things in your life that seem like they are the elephant in the room. You just can't get past them. If you will tackle it one piece at a time, you'll make progress. And before you know it, it begins to snowball and your goals become more achievable. So that means, though, point number 5, I call it taking decisive action. Another way I put it is don't waste your suffering. If you've had a loss, if you've had something that you didn't know how you were going to come through it and it's still lingering, there's still residual challenges based on that, don't waste that suffering. If you're going to have to deal with that suffering, make it redemptive. Do what you can to make sure that whatever that adverse situation was, you're going to take action to make sure that you get the most mileage you can. And some things, honestly, it's even challenging to know, how can I take decisive action? That thing knocked me off my feet. That really set me back. That's the time you put into place the other things that have gone before you. And you can find someone who can help you begin to take some decisive action. The first step of decisive action, though, is how you think about what's happening to you. Life happens. It's not always our fault. Sometimes things happen and they just come out of nowhere. But it doesn't mean that around the corner, there's lurking something else that's going to happen. I want you to live your best life in spite of the things we have to go through. Be the best you can be. So look for opportunities for self-discovery. What can I learn about myself through that? You know, when I was playing that ping pong game and I was getting beat, what did I learn about myself? Well, I learned, Kevin, if you quit, you're never going to be any better than you are right now. I learned that there's something in me that makes me stick to it. And so I've had to learn that, because I would take class. Can I be honest for a moment? In college, I would take classes, and if the class was too hard, guess what I would do? I'd drop it.
Drop it.
I'd drop it like it's hot. And I'd take a class that wasn't so hard. But then when I got to grad school, I found out every class was challenging. And either I was going to meet the challenge or I was going to drop out. At that point, I had a decision to make. Was I going to run from this, or was I going to face it and deal with what I hadn't dealt with before? See, if you don't deal with these life lessons, you keep going around them. They keep coming back in a different form. And I just want to encourage you to take opportunity for self-discovery. Number seven, nurture a positive view of yourself. Even if you've missed it and you know you messed up, even if the cause of you not being resilient is your own fault, it's okay. Have a positive outlook about yourself. So in saying that, let me give you a car illustration. Car has a rear view mirror and two side view mirrors. Have you noticed, though, that in relation to the front windshield, those three are very small? It's because we got to spend more time looking forward than we do looking back. Because if you look back, you're going to have an accident in your future. So you never look back, you glance back. And you know what? We all glance back, but don't start glancing back and then stay looking back about your mistakes. It's over. You can't change it. What you have is today. Make the most of it. So That takes me to number 8. Keep things in perspective. Life happens. Good things happen to people. Bad things happen to people. I wish the good thing had happened that I was that person in Illinois that won the $1 billion lottery. It didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with Kevin. It just means that somebody was in the right place. Who knows? If I give up and never try again, I'll never get a chance to win. Now, I'm not saying that because, I understand addictions. I'm not saying advocating you go play the lottery and play. That's not what I'm saying. Hopefully, you get the illustration of what I'm saying. And it is that you got to keep life in perspective. Number 9, I think for me, this is the most important one. Maintain a hopeful outlook, even in the midst of unhopeful looking situations. Here, I'll tell you a story. The last little story, I hope. Next to last, I got one more to tell you, but let me tell you this one. You've heard the story about the 2 little boys. One was pessimistic, one was optimistic. They put the little pessimistic boy in a room full of toys. They closed the door and they left him in there. They peered through the hole in the door to see what the little pessimistic boy was doing. He was in the middle of a room full of toys and he was crying, bawling his eyes out. They said, open the little peephole, and they said, little boy, you're in a room full of toys. Why are you crying? He looked at him with tears running down. He said, there's too many toys. I don't know which one to open first.
Aww.
The other little boy, the optimistic boy, they had put him in a room full of horse doo-doo. He was covered from head to toe with They looked in, it was flying everywhere. He had a great big smile on his face, laughing, enjoying himself. They were intrigued. Why is he in a room full of horse stuff and he's laughing? So after a while, they opened the door, the little peephole, they looked in at the little boy. They said, young fellow, why are you laughing? Don't you realize where you are? He said, yeah, I'm in a room full of horse stuff. There must be a pony in here somewhere. And that, my friends, is always remaining hopeful. No matter how much crap life gives us, if you're going to be resilient, you have to always remain hopeful, even when you're crying. Last thing, last step of building resilience, take care of yourself. I can't stress that enough. Take care of yourself. You're worth it. Don't let being in a bad place cause you to think bad about yourself. Take care of who you are. You're here for a purpose. You're here for a reason. If for no other reason than I have a chance to meet you and be with you this evening. So be aware of taking care of yourself. You're important. You're important to what happens at starting point. You're important to the people around you. Those are the 10 pillars about building resilience. And then later on, I'm going to, after we're done, I'd like to just share a little story about a crepe myrtle, and I hope that it's of value to you. Loretta?
Oh, Kevin, no, please tell the story about the flower.
So, I like crepe myrtles. And when they're in full bloom, the crepe myrtle, they just bend over. They look like they're going to just break. And when it rains, crepe myrtles hold the water. The flowers are holding all the water, and they're really bent out of shape. But after the storm is over and the sun comes out, and the crepe myrtle, the flowers, the rainwater is absorbed, or it whatever that, I forget the word for when it evaporates. The crepe myrtle comes back into shape again. But what I noticed is the shape is even more full and more well-rounded. That's what resilience is. Not only do you bounce back, but you bounce back more fully, more vibrantly than you were even before the incident occurred. That's my little illustration about crepe myrtles and how we can apply it to our own lives.
That was wonderful, Kevin. Thank you so very much. Well, thank you all for joining us. And as I promised, we're going to end here and then give you time to ask your own questions.